You open your pay stub. Same job, new year, and the number just went up by $2,000. For about 4 seconds, you feel like a different person. Then you check the price of everything else, and the feeling evaporates before your coffee gets cold. Here's what almost nobody tells you about salary. The number on your offer letter is not a fixed identity. It is a stage you pass through, and every stage rewires how you think about money, time, and yourself, usually not in the way you'd expect. So let's walk through it. Every income bracket, from $20,000 a year to $1 million. What actually changes, what quietly doesn't, and why the jump that changes your life the most might not be the one you think. Start at $20,000 a year. That's roughly $10 an hour, full-time. Close to what a full-time minimum wage worker earns in much of the United States today. At this level, money isn't a planning problem. It's a bandwidth problem. Economist Senthil Mullainathan and psychologist Eldar Shafir studied this directly in their research on scarcity, later published as the book Scarcity: Why Having Too Little Means So Much. They found that financial scarcity acts like a tax on cognitive bandwidth. The same mental capacity you'd use to plan, focus, or make good long-term decisions gets consumed by the constant, exhausting math of "can I afford this right now?" Their experiments showed something counterintuitive. Give people under financial stress a temporary cash infusion, and their decision-making measurably improves. Not because they got smarter, because the tax got lifted at $20,000. Every purchase is a trade-off you can feel in your body. There's no room for a bad month. Move to $35,000. This sits close to the line economists use for a full-time median wage worker without a college degree. Something shifts here, but it's subtle. You go from reacting to money to occasionally planning around it. A small emergency fund becomes possible. Not comfortable. Possible. Researchers at the Federal Reserve, in the annual survey of consumer finances, consistently find that having even a few $100s in accessible savings dramatically lowers reported financial stress. Not because the amount is large, but because it interrupts the chain reaction where one bad week turns into 3 months of debt, $50,000. Here's where most people expect to finally feel fine. Often, they don't. And there's a name for why. See, Northcote Parkinson, the historian who coined Parkinson's Law, originally wrote it about bureaucracy. Work expands to fill the time available for its completion, but the same logic applies almost perfectly to income. Expenses expand to meet whatever you earn. Give someone a raise from $35,000 to $50,000, and within a year, their rent, their car, and their subscriptions have usually crept up to match it. Quietly, one upgrade at a time, each one individually justified. The raise happened. The feeling of having more didn't. $75,000. This number has its own research history, and it's more nuanced than the popular version you've probably heard. In 2010, Daniel Kahneman and economist Angus Deaton published a widely cited study suggesting emotional well-being plateaus once household income crosses roughly this line. Beyond it, more money stops measurably improving your day-to-day mood. That finding got repeated everywhere for a decade. Then in 2021, happiness researcher Matthew Killingsworth ran a larger, more granular study using real-time mood tracking and found the plateau isn't universal. For most people, happiness keeps climbing well past 75,000. It only flattens for a specific unhappy minority whose problems were never about money in the first place. Kahneman and Killingsworth later co-authored a joint analysis, reconciling both findings. The honest takeaway: for most people, more income keeps helping, just less dramatically than the jump from scarcity to stability, $100,000, 6 figures. Culturally, this is the number people treat as made it. Practically, in most major cities, it buys you a comfortable, unremarkable life. Not a lifestyle upgrade so much as the removal of certain chronic worries. What actually changes at six figures is more psychological than material. You stop doing math at the grocery store. You start doing math about the future instead. A house, a kid's education, retirement. The stress doesn't disappear. It moves upstream, from can I cover this week to am I building toward anything? There's also a tax reality that most people underestimate here. Every dollar past this point is taxed at a higher marginal rate than the ones before it. In the US federal system, a household crossing into six figures often lands in the 22 to 24% bracket. That doesn't mean the raise isn't worth it. It means the number on the offer letter and the number that actually lands in your account start drifting further apart, and almost nobody adjusts their mental math to account for it. What matters at this stage isn't only how much you have left over, it's what you do with it. Psychologists Elizabeth Dunn and Michael Norton, in their research later published as Happy Money, The Science of Smarter Spending, found that how you spend a dollar of surplus predicts your happiness better than how large that surplus is. Spending on experiences, on time saved, or on other people consistently outperformed spending on possessions. Even among people with nearly identical incomes. Two people earning the same six-figure salary can end the year in completely different emotional places. And the gap has almost nothing to do with the number on their pay stub, $150,000. This is where geography quietly rewrites everything. Regional price parity data from the U.S. Bureau of Economic Analysis shows that the same salary can feel like two entirely different lives depending on where you live. $150,000 in a major coastal metro can carry roughly the same purchasing power as $70,000 or $80,000 in a lower-cost city. Nobody puts that adjustment on the offer letter. You find out the hard way, the first time you compare your rent to a friend's mortgage payment in another state. This is also often the income level where a household, not an individual, crosses into six figures for the first time, usually because two incomes combined rather than one income climbing alone. The math changes. The stress doesn't always follow the math down. $200,000. Something interesting happens here that economist Raj Chetty's mobility research helps explain, even though his work is usually cited for a different reason. Chetty and his team at Opportunity Insights have spent years tracking how income compounds across a household's trajectory, not just in a single year's paycheck. At this level, income increasingly buys you optionality rather than objects. You can absorb a job loss. You can move for a better opportunity without panicking about the deposit. You can say no to overtime. The stress at $200,000 isn't usually about survival anymore. It's about whether the hours you're trading for it are worth what you're getting back. A question that $20,000 you never had the luxury of asking. $500,000. At this level, you've entered rough top 1% household income territory in the United States. And the psychology shifts again in a direction that surprises people. Lifestyle creep, the same force from Parkinson's law, tends to get more dangerous here, not less. Because at $500,000, almost any purchase feels individually justifiable. A nicer car, a bigger house, private school. Each one is affordable on its own. Stacked together, they quietly consume the entire gap between $500,000 and feeling rich, which is exactly why so many high earners describe feeling financially stretched despite being, on paper, extraordinarily well paid. The income solved the old problems. It didn't remove the mechanism that creates new ones. $1 million a year. At this point, the conversation stops being about income and starts being about what you do with it. $1 million a year, even after taxes, still leaves you with more cash than most household expenses can absorb, which means the defining skill at this level isn't earning. It's what you do with the surplus. This is where the gap opens between people who convert high income into lasting wealth and people who convert it into an expensive treadmill. The mechanism is close to what economist Thomas Piketty describes in his research on capital. Earned income, no matter how large, is still labor income. It stops the moment you stop working. Wealth that compounds on its own, independent of your effort, is a different category entirely. At $1 million a year, you finally have enough surplus to build that second category. Most people at this income level who still feel behind aren't behind on income. They're behind on that conversion. So walk back through it. $20,000 is a bandwidth problem, one that eats your ability to plan before it ever touches your ability to spend. $50,000 is a discipline problem, because the expenses will always try to catch up to whatever you earn. $75,000 is where research says your day-to-day mood, for most people, keeps genuinely improving, not flattening. 6 figures moves your stress from this week to your future and quietly starts to matter more for what you spend it on than how much of it there is. 150,000 reminds you that the same number means different things in different zip codes. 200,000 starts buying you time and optionality instead of objects. 500,000 proves that lifestyle creep doesn't stop on its own just because the income got bigger, and $1 million stops being about how much you earn and starts being entirely about what you let it become. You open your pay stub again. Same job, new year, another number that just went up. This time, you already know. The 4 seconds of feeling like a different person were never really about the number. They were about what happens in the 52 weeks after it.